go ahead and introduce the representative of the 17th Senate District, Senator Jorge Cabrera, to give the public address.
Thank you so much, MLK. Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see all of you here on this incredible commemoration for a great man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. First, let me say greetings and hello to some of my friends who I see here on the Zoom, to folks from my delegation, Representative Cara Rochelle. I know Representative Mary Wheelander is here, Nicole Claridis Dietra is here, and of course, Mayor Cassetti, Mayor Zekin. I see a variety of clergy here who I know, of course, David Morgan for putting this together, and the entire incredible, hardworking staff, that team who has worked through an unprecedented pandemic to make sure that people in the Valley get the support and the resources they need. Our hearts and our hats go off to you. It is not easy work. It is difficult work, and we commend you for continuing to stay in the fight. I have been thinking all weekend about Dr. King's legacy at a time in our country where, as all of you know, we are going through great change, lots of despair. And my own journey to Dr. King began in my teens. I'm really happy to see so many young people like Malika leading the charge here and others, because Dr. King understood the importance of involving young people in the struggle for civil rights and the struggle for voting rights and human rights all across this country and in the world. And my own journey to Dr. King began right around the time when the King estate commissioned Dr. King's speeches back then. I'm dating myself a little, but some of you who are a little older might appreciate this. Back then, they released Dr. King's speeches in cassettes. Some of you may remember our cars had old cassette tapes. And I had a long road trip. In fact, it was a very long drive for one of my first jobs. And I had about a 10-hour drive. And during those 10 hours, I just drove my car and popped in tape after tape after tape of Dr. King's speech. Everything from the iconic "I Have a Dream" speech to the Vietnam speech to just a whole host of other speeches that oftentimes don't make it into the common memory. And that led to an incredible appreciation and admiration for Dr. King and the work that he did, not only in the 60s, but that resonates even today, and how many people he touched and how much he changed our world. He is really an incredible human being who we continue to honor so many decades after his passing. And I'm mindful of the contribution he made to us and how we need to continue his legacy. You know, he is the only American with a monument in Washington who is not an elected official, a man who never held formal political office, but who exercised enormous political influence because of the strong moral character he had, because of his faith in Christ, and because he refused to bend and to yield to the forces of darkness and evil in our country that would tell him and millions of others that they are not a man, that they are not a woman, that they don't deserve the same privileges and rights and humanity as other Americans. And I think it's important to remember how much he had gone through, how much the people around him went through, who he inspired. I think sometimes it's easy for us to forget the struggle. Part of it is because in many minds it happened so long ago, though it really wasn't that long ago. And I think also because we have achieved a great deal of success. But we have to remember, this is a man and the movement he inspired and the people who rose up to march and to sit in, who literally had dogs attacking them, biting them, causing injury, water hoses turned on them, water hoses where the pressure of the water was so strong, it would rip the bark off of trees, where you see women and children being flung in the air by the pressure and the power of these water hoses. Homes that were bombed. Dr. King's own home was bombed. His daughters came within feet of being incinerated. A man who lived under the threat of death, literally every single day of his life. And yet he endured, and yet he persisted, and he refused to give in. And he did it with love, something that is incredible when you think about the amount of discipline and character that it takes to continually stare death in the face, to have such violence upon you, and to literally say, no, I will not return an eye for an eye. I will love. I will love my enemy. I will find a way to be righteous and to tell the truth and keep on. And for his sacrifice, he died. And I think today, when I think of Dr. King, I was thinking this weekend, what would he say about the times we're living in today? We all know what we're going through in this country. Just a few days ago, voting rights was shot down in the United States Congress, where it seems that there are Americans who are bent on making voting harder for people of color, longer lines, less polling places, making it harder to register to vote, making it harder to vote by absentee ballot. This is a time in America where we are being tested. And I thought about that this weekend, and what would Dr. King say? What would he say if we looked at the landscape and looked at the hyperpolarization, the way we seem to be at each other's throats seemingly every other day over so many things, where our country seems so polarized, and almost like we're beginning to lose our democracy, like we're beginning to just, deal with this pandemic that has exposed the income inequality in our country, where people are suffering with so many mental health challenges because of it, where children are not getting classroom time. There's so many challenges that we face. And I thought about that this weekend and Dr. King, and I wonder what would he say in this time where it seems like we're fighting enemies all around. And luckily, I didn't have to go too far to think what I think, and it's not perfect, but what I think he would say, because he's talked about loving your enemies many times. And I like to, before I close, just share with you a speech that I think sometimes gets overlooked. The I Have a Dream speech is an iconic speech that is played over and over again, and it's an important speech and a groundbreaking speech. But there are many other speeches Dr. King made that I think sometimes are not read enough in the public domain. So I'd like to share you a quick excerpt of what I think Dr. King would say to us during this time in our country. And it's a speech called Loving Your Enemies. Some of you may be familiar with it. And Dr. King spoke and said, "It is love that will save our world and our civilization. Love even for enemies. Within the worst of us, there is some good. When we come to this, we take a different attitude toward individuals. The person who hates you most has some good in him or her. Even the race that hates you most has some good in it. And when you come to the point that you look in the face of every man and see deep down within him what religion calls the image of God, you begin to love him in spite of. No matter what he does, you see God's image there. There is an element of goodness that can never saw off. Discover the elements of good in your enemy. And as you seek to hate him, find the center of goodness and place your attention there, and you will take a new attitude." That's the attitude I think Dr. King would want us to take today, to love our enemies. It is not easy. It is not something that comes naturally. But I would hope, and my hope and my prayer for all of us here in our community, as we continue to do the good work that Dr. King started so many decades ago to feed the poor, to make sure that the civil rights he fought for are protected and expanded for more people, making sure we protect voting in this country, making sure we have the passion and desire to address the needs of the poor, to make sure that justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream, that we would love each other and love our enemies. So I want to thank you today for having me. I will want to continue to work with each and every one of you in all your respective domains to make sure that we create that beloved community that Dr. King fought and died for. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Senator Cabrera.